Hi, Amy. So good to see you and talk.
Sarah.
We are, for once, both in Switzerland. I usually have guests, not always in the same location. So even though we're both obviously homebound, at least we're in the same city. We have the same weather. It's beautiful outside.
Yeah, lucky day.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm so glad you could make the time to talk to me and my audience.
Sure.
You're definitely the reference I think of when it comes to communication, and also kind of for this partner concept that we're going to be talking about, because I read your book, The Ego Tango, and we'll talk about that probably, I would say, 10 years ago, and it had a lasting effect on me. So
Really? That's awesome to hear.
yeah. So the reason I brought you on is really to talk to us about communication, specifically when it comes to communication with our partners, because that's really who we are spending a lot of time with right now.
Yeah.
And probably more time than usually. I said on my last podcast episode, kind of as an intro to this one, usually my partner, my husband and I, he is at a corporate job, so he's outside of the house most of the time. He comes home for dinner. We see each other at dinner. And then actually both of us are introverts. So I like to read on my own at night, and he likes to do his things. He's learning to play piano right now. So really, we spend about probably maybe 2 hours max per day. And obviously right now, well, we're still in separate offices, but we see each other much more.
Yeah.
And then given also the situation where the kids are at home, it just leads to more of these little moments of, I wouldn't say tension, but it does get tense sometimes, but it's just like challenging in terms of communication.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm not the only one. And so that's why I wanted to bring you on. I want to start with this idea of perfectionism.
Yeah.
Because that's a topic that we talk on this podcast, in previous episodes. And it's really something I think, and I heard you mention that on one of your webinars as well, something that is especially in the spotlight right now, because I think if we haven't yet let go of our perfectionism, then maybe right now is the ideal moment to talk to us about perfectionism.
Okay, and let me back up a tiny bit and give a framework for some of your listeners who may not be familiar with this model that I use a lot.
Right.
The model is called predator, prey, or partner. And I do it this way because it's like a continuum. So for people listening, you imagine on one extreme is the predator, which we refer to someone as being holding very high respect for herself or himself, not enough for the other.
Right.
And this can damage relationships. People feel disrespected or intimidated. The other extreme on the continuum is the prey, and that's P-R-E-Y. This is the person who's usually too nice, shows too much respect for the other, not enough for him or herself. And sadly, not only do they not get the respect they deserve, they can actually get mistreated. It can, in fact, trigger a predator reaction from other people.
Right.
So, and under stress, many of us will either go predator or go prey.
So really? So it's not a set thing that you are always the predator or always a prey.
Some of us have a tendency to be more.
So I'm a recovering predator. And so I think we have people have a strong preference.
Uh-huh.
Though, here's an example. We can be prey at work under pressure and predator at home. This is a typical pattern because the people at home, they have a harder time getting rid of us legally, right? And so we just intuitively know we have to behave more appropriately at work and we sometimes misbehave more in the personal sphere.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is actually a model my sister Pat Kirkland developed. And if people are curious to know, they can find out more about her on patkirklandleadership.com. So she's a recovering prey. I'm a recovering predator. Luckily, I'm the younger sibling, but shorter sibling. And so we want to be aware of what is our default under pressure. And then the invitation is to step in partner even before we need it. Stay in partner when the going gets tough, and remain in partner even if we don't get what we want in that moment. Because the magic thing, Sarah, is that at any point before, during, or after any exchange, magic can happen, and you can, in a very bizarre way, sometimes get what you want, and you could have never predicted that.
So you mentioned there's predator and prey, and there's partner.
Yeah.
And so what is the partner? What's that role? Describe that.
The partner holds high respect for herself and high respect for the other. And people say, okay, well, that'll work in certain cultures, or because I'm not only American, I am so American after 25 years of living in Switzerland. And I can assure people that I teach this around the globe, and I work with people in many different locations around the world, and they attest to the fact that, yep, this will work. This works in an Asian culture, it works in a European culture, it works North American, it works across the globe, because the currency is respect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about, oh, I'm getting respect so my ego feels good. It's much more important than that. I'm getting respect, and therefore I feel safe. Therefore, I believe I won't die today. So it's literally respect that translates to our how likely we are to survive in that moment, in that exchange, even though we're just talking about getting a presentation together, or just the most mundane things. We still go to that sense of survival.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's that survival instinct that makes us go into those crazy moments. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So tying this back, now that I've given this foundation, your question about perfectionism. Now, for me, I don't know if it's because I'm a younger sibling, I don't consider myself a perfectionist. And I admire perfectionists because it has gotten them to where they are today.
Mm-hmm.
Yet I have this analogy. I see perfectionism as something, it's like driving the car with the handbrake on. We're still going to get to where we want to go, except there's a lot more wear and tear on the engine.
Right.
So I invite people to just become really aware, if they're not realizing they're a perfectionist, to become more aware of that. And if they are, like you said, I love how you said it, using this moment in time, maybe now is the opportunity for us to say, I'm going to practice letting go of, or I'm even better, I'm going to play with letting go of being a perfectionist.
Yeah.
And translating that perfectionism of having excessively high standards.
Yeah, exactly. I can give you an example. Like I was on we called it a quarantini, basically an online happy hour with my sister and another friend, and all of us are moms, and it was Friday evening. And so we all had our little drink, and two of us, my sister and I, were literally just sitting there and, enjoying the moment. And the third friend, she was like busy making this meal at the same time. And, it did not just any meal, but like this really healthy meal for her kids. And I could just feel the tension in her. And yes, she was obviously very proud that she was cooking this perfectly healthy meal. And my sister and I were like, yeah, but we cooked for the rest of the week. It's not just like we only had fast food.
Right.
But at the same time, we gave ourselves permission to say, you know what, right now, this is what we need.
Yeah.
And we had to let go of that perfectionism. And I was literally just pizzas that night. And so that I see that a lot with friends, especially moms, right? In this time right now, having to let go of certain of those high standards that maybe in other times they still serve you, but even then maybe sometimes it's helpful to let go of some of these.
Yeah. As I'm listening to you, a couple things coming to me. On a side note, I'm pretty sure that you just created the name of a new cocktail called the Quarantini.
I've seen it on Facebook, so I didn't come up with it.
And the second thing I'm thinking of is that I think, especially when I think about shock and how the body reacts to shock.
Right.
And we're kind of numb at first, and we're sort of don't realize a situation is as bad as it is, and we're not always able to respond. So we go to our automatic, which is
Right.
why, if we're more predator under pressure, we're going to be more predator. If we're more tendency to go prey, with
Mm-hmm.
those are defaults. And so this idea that to help people realize we are in a form of a crisis. There are many people that are frontline experiencing it firsthand, and it's really easy for them to see, oh yeah, this is a crisis. For many of us who are just hanging out at home, I don't think we're fully, some of us not fully conscious. And so we're doing our normal pattern and doing more of the same. So the perfectionism is getting almost heightened and extreme because that's what sort of soothes us,
Mm-hmm.
and because it's the automatic behavior.
Yeah.
So I really love the story of you and your sister going, got to let this go. And that's, consider yourself an important role model to your friend as well. Now, and the other thought I was having was reducing that sense of perfectionism is not going to come without probably increased sense of guilt or
Yeah.
maybe shame.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to realize for many people, I'm going to play with being less perfectionist doesn't mean it's going to feel easy or fun. So how can you bring in the lightness? Can you make these baby steps? Whether it's lowering the expectations on the kind of meals you have or what time you eat, or that the kid's going to get all of their schoolwork done,
Yeah.
or being, and doing something, replacing with something outrageous like a dance party, at 2 p.m. or at 10 p.m. when they're all supposed to be in bed.
Right.
That's what comes to me as actionable items or actionable activities or actions, rather, actionable actions for to help people step in out of this perfectionism.
Yeah, two things that you said. First, you said, well, we're in a crisis, but for some of us, it maybe doesn't feel like a crisis because, well, we're not directly involved, or we just see it on the news, but it doesn't actually impact our family so much. But at the same time, there is this underlying heavy energy, and I think we all feel that, whether we know someone who's sick or not. And so you're right, it is still a crisis, whether it impacts us directly in the sense that we know someone, or if it's just this heavy energy that, and not just the virus, but all this talk about the economy going so badly and all of that. So I think that definitely has an impact on all of us. And then the other thing, I think, perfectionism, the reason that has to do with communication is because, of course, that impacts how we communicate and kind of run the house, or have certain rules in our house that maybe, yes, during regular times these are the rules, kids have to be at bed at 8, but if we are too stuck with those rules right now, and our partner doesn't necessarily agree with those rules, or maybe he or she is a bit more flexible, that's when these small things can really blow up, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of things around the perfectionism that I tie to the model of predator-prey partner is that people often say, oh, I have to be a partner with someone else. And my feeling is be a partner with yourself first. That idea. And one of the things I think that's many people struggle with, who especially who are perfectionists, is this feeling of being selfish, that being selfish is somehow bad or negative or indulgent.
Right.
And my feeling is, oh, baby, it's critical for us to be able to get out of this experience, to arrive on the other side and not be completely destroyed by it.
Yeah.
And that's if selfishness is important, in the daily life as well. So I would also encourage people to practice small acts of selfishness, whether it's taking time out or enjoying, that last piece of chicken. Okay, yes, I could save it for the kids for lunch tomorrow. No, I'm really, really want that right now.
Right.
So little things like that.
Yeah, my husband, right now he's at the lake because to him, he just told me, look, I have to get out at lunch. I'd love to eat with you, but I really need to get out of the house. He's one who's not used to working from home, right? And so, given that we have such beautiful weather, he's just like, I need to get out. I need to meditate at the lake and just be surrounded by nature. And yeah, at the beginning I was like, oh, so I'm stuck at home with the kids. But in a way, I'm like, okay, fine, you get that privilege and I will get another privilege. And so it's kind of
Yeah.
this communication around what matters to each of us.
Yes.
And I can still go out for my walk later on in the day, which he
Right.
can't so much because he's more bound to certain hours to be
Mm.
present. So it
I
worked
love
out
that
that way.
that flexibility you're finding. And for me, his selfishness, one, the good news is he knows what he needs. Fantastic. Second thing is that he's asking for it, or he's informing you, honey, this is really what I need. And then he's doing it.
Right.
And the cool thing is, the other way you could see this, Sarah, is like that's a gift to you, because what he's doing is he's restoring his energy, his peace of mind, his resilience. And it's resilience what helps us to stay partner, is what helps us to stay partner.
Mm,
And you have different ways of doing it. So he's investing in your relationship, your family, by taking care of himself.
right. Yeah.
So you could even thank him for going to the lake today. Honey, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
I'm sure it helps because he's then, when it comes to actually spending time with us, he's had that time to, like you said, resource himself. And
Right.
I'd rather have him that way than being all tense from, 8 hours of meetings. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I think that brings us kind of to the second topic, which is somehow related, and that's boundaries. So,
Yes.
putting in place boundaries about your energy, about how you're using your time, even with the kids, because again, I guess it goes hand in hand with guilt or shame. Again, you're like, well, I'm finally home. I should be spending all my time with my kids. How could I put them in front of the TV? And so putting in place those boundaries, somewhat
Mhm.
guilt-free, or at least reduce the guilt. I think that's an
Yeah.
important thing right now too.
Here's something are you familiar? You know about nonviolent communication, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this to me, even though I feel like it's the complement to the predator-prey partner model.
Right.
PPP, what I call that model, is the packaging of how to look and sound like a partner. And the NVC helps me to speak my message as a partner.
Yeah.
Though another hidden huge benefit of nonviolent communication is that it offers emergency self-empathy.
Mm.
So when those feelings of guilt or shame creep in, or maybe anger or frustration, or just you don't know what the feeling is, I really encourage, I do this myself, I encourage my clients to do it. Review the list of feelings and needs. And if you want, Sarah, I can give a link to my website because I have it there, or people can just go on uh,
Please.
nvctraining.com or cnvc, no, not com. Let me do it again. nvctraining.org or cnvc.org. Great websites, resources for NVC.
Okay, great.
So they could download the list of feelings, download the list of needs. And what they just do is they sit with them right in the moment. How am I feeling? Oh, I'm feeling embarrassed, or I'm feeling anxious, or whatever it is. And then they look at the needs. What needs do I have? Oh, I have a need for integrity or respect or understanding or to be seen. And this weird magical thing happens. We just by identifying our feelings and our needs, it can often create a sense of calm within us right in that moment, even though the situation might not be resolved.
Right.
So, I'm going to set a boundary. I did it. Gosh, it feels yucky. I feel embarrassed. I feel indulgent. I feel disappointed. Well, yes, I had a need for calm, or I had a need for peace, or I had a need for investing in myself, whatever it is. And that will sometimes help people through those challenging moments.
Yeah, I like that. Tara Brock, whom I often listen to as well, she uses also this idea of naming the fear or naming the feeling, right? So I can totally see how
Yes.
that is helpful. Just sitting with it, acknowledging it, and giving it a name, or picking one of the feelings off the list. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us some other concepts that you use with your clients in, in this kind of area of communication, and specifically with partners.
Yes, and this is going to be important for your partners, with your other family members, and people will see very quickly it's going to work for your business colleagues as well. And this is a series of, so let's say there's a situation, you talk about that tension or that frustration. Often, many of us are impulsive and we react right in the moment.
Right.
Problem with that is we're likely to be sarcastic. Really, Sarah, you thought that was a good idea? You can hear it.
Especially using that first name. Oh my God. My husband,
Right. That's the
just
time.
when I say Tony, he's like, oh no, don't Tony me.
Or the rolling of the eyes. I don't know if you're guilty of this. Honey, are you kidding me? Or interrupting the other. So those are 3 of the behaviors that will get us in trouble immediately.
Right.
So my first suggestion is, if you can, take a time out. Pause. Don't give into that urge to just blurt whatever on your mind in that moment, because that we often live to regret those moments. So just take a time out, say, sweetie, can tell I'm feeling some frustration about this at the moment. I want to take a break and I'm going to go for a walk. And when I come back, if you're open to it, we can sit down and talking about it.
Mm.
So already there's that's in a way setting a boundary too.
Right.
And then when you're on your walk, you want to think, review, reflect, and remove any sarcastic tone. Say, I want to tell him this, or say this, or tell him, and then you listen for that sarcasm, those nasty comments, get rid of those. And then come back to them and do the following. And this is going to work if in the moment you don't remember to take the time out and pause, you still want to use or especially want to use these behaviors that I'm about to list in that exchange. So either take the time, reflect, which will increase the chances that you're going to be successful. And if not, then make sure, 1, you speak slow and calm without any sarcasm. There's a great expression. It's hard to fight in slow motion. So if you and I, Sarah, if we're in a disagreement or an argument, and I speak to you very slowly without that sarcasm, Sarah, I'm feeling frustrated because we agreed that we would meet at 2:00. All right, so I'm giving you the bad news. I'm not hiding anything, though I'm saying it slow and calm. And that way you're less likely to get defensive and you can still hear my message.
Right.
Second thing is I use short sentences. So I don't say, Sarah, I'm really frustrated because we're going to meet at 2:00, because what we said last week was that when we talked at 2:00 that I would be able to explain the project. And you're like in overwhelm.
Yeah. And I want to interrupt you. Like, stop
Right.
talking. Let me interrupt.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, thank you for saying that. Because when I do short sentences with little micro pauses, for example, right now, I'm using just a couple of words before I add a pause. Your brain, 1, it's slowing things down. It's making it easier for you to digest my message. And the second thing that's happening is unconsciously, you think, oh, I could interrupt her here or here or here. So I'm buying more patience from you when I use these short sentences with pauses.
Mm.
Third thing, let yourself be interrupted. It'll just about kill you. Do it anyway. And then and don't do it like this. None of this sarcastic. So you just, Tony, yes. Or sweetheart, tell me. So even though it's not fair, they should let you have, you've got the invisible microphone, they should let you speak. It doesn't work like that. So you're the one, your job is to play partner, hold the partner frame, and you're, with these behaviors, you're inviting the other person in. And they're likely, no guarantee, likely to recalibrate their own behaviors. The two other behaviors I'd encourage people to do is to keep a soft smile. So if I'm not smiling and I look too serious, that will feel like a threat to the other person. Whereas a soft smile, even in a disagreement, and I'm not talking about this kind of smile, right? And I'm not this either, just a soft, gentle smile. And people can do this with their eyes. So notice that I do this. This is a bad fake smile.
Right.
Watch my eyes, and this is what I call a good fake smile.
Yeah.
So if I
Definitely see, and for those of us who are listening on the podcast, basically it's the eyes that make the difference, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Finally, the last thing I encourage people to do is and this takes more time than just in one, all of those skills actually I listed take time to practice in order to integrate, to be able to do under pressure. So,
I would say probably it's the practice of a lifetime. Would you agree with that?
For sure, you're right, because I'm still struggle with it. Though I can tell you, because I forced myself and trained myself, some of the stuff I can do automatically.
Yeah.
And some I just have to have my little voice going, okay, Amy, soft smile,
Yeah.
keep your mouth shut.
I think you snap out of it faster. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and you're able to recalibrate. And then this last one is the tough one, and this takes training, is remove the word but.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I have a newsletter number 4 or something on my website that talks about how to replace it with a whole bunch of other options. It unfortunately triggers defensiveness from others when we hear it.
Another word I heard sometimes, can't remember where, but that shouldn't be used is always. Like, you always do this or you always do that. And obviously the other person is going to be like, no, I don't always do
Exactly.
that.
There's going to be that one time they didn't. I think that comes from nonviolent communication. I think words like always and never, they label as violent communication because it will trigger someone to get defensive.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are great techniques. I love them.
Cool.
Like you said, I think just the fact to talk slower, it also doesn't just help the other person. I think it helps you also to calm down your nervous system rather than getting all upset.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's this great book I read, I listened to it on tape, called The Vagus Nerve.
Okay.
So I learned a few years ago, there's this huge nerve that starts in the back of our head, goes all the way down, and it's almost like it has almost like it has a brain of its own. I don't know if I'm saying that accurately, but that's how I understood it. And it's how the vagus nerve is what helps us to get into that parasympathetic stage, that calm stage.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool book, and some of it's a little too much science over my head, though. There's some very, very specific techniques, physical things like, and I'm pointing to my throat because they talk about coughing and burping and singing loud, because apparently that triggers the nerve, and it'll help you to get into this calmer state.
Interesting. What's the name of the book again?
It's called The Vagus Nerve, VAGUE. So here's my new recommendation. Just before we're having a difficult conversation, sing your favorite song as loud as you can.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's great. One thing that I thought about, though, as you were listing these different techniques, is the ego. Like, what do we do with the ego? And that kind of brings us back to the beginning, how we started our conversation, because you wrote this book, what was it, probably 10 years ago, something like that, The Ego Tango.
13, or maybe I think it took me 3 years to produce. So yeah, exactly, 10 years ago, 2010. I think you're right.
Okay, great. Yeah. So tell us, what do we do with the ego?
There we go.
Situations.
I just carry a copy with me wherever I go.
There you go. There it is.
So the question you asked is what to do with the ego?
Yeah.
I talk about check the ego at the door, except it's like, well, what your question is like, how do you do that, Amy? So that thing we talked about earlier, nonviolent communication. go to that. Go to the emergency self-empathy immediately. So
Right.
the moment you're feeling yourself triggered, and I say triggered because that could mean you're feeling scared or angry or frustrated or confused or embarrassed or ashamed. It could be so many different emotions. First, see if you can take out that list. Don't try to figure it out on your own. The list has got like what, 60, 80 feelings. Make the list do the work. Just go through that list, check them off. You may come up with 10 or 12 feelings. Get your top 3. And then the needs. And then so it's a matter of, being aware, oh, my ego has been triggered.
Mm.
2, finding some space to take a minute to reflect. And the thing, I don't know if this is true for a lot of people, when I'm angry, I'm kind of one of those people, I enjoy being angry. It's like, especially when it's righteous anger.
Right.
I'm a little embarrassed to admit that. And that is not going to get me what I want.
No.
So the feelings and needs help me to, I'm feeling indignant, or I have a need for fairness. That's a big one. I call myself a protective predator. I used to go predator when someone else was being what I perceived as disrespectful to me or to others. And I think that's true for many predators. So we have positive intention, except it's still going to cause us problems. It doesn't justify the reaction.
Right.
So I say start there with the nonviolent communication. And then one of the things I talk about in the book is a technique called make up another story. So often the situation happens and we interpret it's about me. That guy, we can't use these examples at the moment too well. You're driving on the road and someone cuts you off. The good old days when we used to drive.
Yeah.
And we often make up the story instinctively, automatically, so quickly. He did it on purpose.
Right.
And so the standard story is maybe his wife is having a baby. And you and I both know Michael Sanson. This actually happened to his wife. One of their children was either on its way or actually born in the car, I believe. And so I always think of Michael when I think, yep, this can happen to people.
Yeah.
And so that what that does is when I stop making it about me and I make up another interpretation about why they're behaving the way they're behaving. What that does is often it helps me to access empathy for them.
Mm. Yeah.
Now, that's not to justify the behavior or excuse it.
Yeah.
It gets me back into that state of partner. So now I've given myself empathy, I've given them empathy, and now I either decide, oh, I'm good, I'll let the situation go, or no, I want to address it. And then you decide, do I want to address it, the same today, or do I address it, is it with someone who's remote? Do I do it in an email? Do I do it in a phone call? And they talk about, write that email and then go through it and through it and through it. Like a couple of weeks ago, I had to write a delicate email, and I had been thinking about it for a week or two in my head, let's say at least a week in my head. So when I wrote it, it came out pretty clear. And I was ready to send it, Sarah. I was like, no, it's good. This is good. I was really like, good job, Amy. Very, very partner. I said, no, Amy, just wait. Just wait. It's not urgent. Just wait till tomorrow. And sure enough, Sarah, the next day when I read it again, it's like my ego was a little more loose, a little more relaxed. I'm like, oh, I don't have to say this whole section here. Or, oh, that's a little bit snarky still. And so I sent an even cleaner version finally in the end, because I forced myself to wait and take time and reflect.
That's such a good story, and I didn't remember that. I probably read it in your book first, but it stuck with me. And just recently on in the mountains before the crisis, we were standing in line with my parents, and there was a huge lineup to get on the telecab to go up the mountain, right?
Yeah.
And so this family or a mom with 2 small kids, they just squeezed by everybody and not even a sorry. And so my mom is like, oh, what's up with these people? Can't even say excuse me and all of that. And so I told her exactly that. I'm like, well, you don't know. Maybe the kid has to throw up, or has to go to the bathroom real bad, or something. You don't know their story, or maybe they don't speak the language. So I think that idea of always giving the other person the benefit of the doubt
Yeah.
is so helpful. And even just for other situations where we make up stories about, oh, this person probably doesn't like me, that's why they didn't
Yeah.
respond to my email, or it's never good to kind of just assume things or make up your own stories.
And even if it's true,
Yeah.
maybe your story is true, though just by making up another story, you're giving yourself some space, you create that empathy. And then when you go to speak to that person or confront that person as a partner, what you can say is, I made up this story that you did it because you were mad at me, or I made up the story because you did it because you really don't like me. So you can tell them what your fantasy is, though, by you saying I made up, this is making up that was the original story you made up, right? The automatic story, and then you make up a better one. So you tell them that the automatic story, then they might choose to say, you say, oh my gosh, not at all. The reason I did, and they give you an explanation, which you're like, oh, that makes sense. Or maybe they admit, yeah, I'm jealous of you, or I am mad at you.
It opens up a new level of conversation, a
Yeah.
deeper conversation, right? Yeah.
And even if, let's say there is truth to it, like, okay, this person doesn't like me. I had this partner conversation with them. Even just by you having that open conversation, like you said, bringing it to the next level, it often shifts that person's behavior, even if they don't admit to anything. Because that's why I say, you're confronting them, except you're doing it in this positive, respectful, mutually respectful partner way.
They're probably surprised by your vulnerability. They're like,
yes,
taken aback by, wow, okay. And yeah, either it's true, and then that goes into a deeper conversation, or it's not true at all, and you'll actually hear their real story.
Yeah,
Exactly. So interesting.
Yeah, the vulnerability is such a beautiful quality, and it's so scary.
It is, yeah. But what I've noticed also, what is happening in these strange times is that I think we feel more open to vulnerability. It always happens in crisis, is that our values change, what matters most to us changes, and I think that also brings us closer to just really showing up as who we are, and maybe being more vulnerable.
Yeah, no, I'm getting a little teary-eyed because you're speaking to such truth to this, and I've experienced it personally a couple of times, and reaching out to people who need help, people reaching out to me, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah. We're, like you say, we're open to ask for help also more than probably in regular times, and let's just hope it stays that way.
Yeah. And this is my mom, she's 92, and she's what I guess they call a whippersnapper. She's amazing. She's always struggled with asking for help. And when I explained to her that, Mom, when you ask other people for help, the human brain is apparently hardwired to want to help each other. So you're serving that other person. You're giving them a huge gift, because often we get to feel amazing about ourselves when other people ask us for help.
Right.
That also doesn't mean you have to say yes if it's not right for you in that moment. So, also setting the boundaries. So for the people who struggle with asking for help, you are giving people a gift when you do it.
So true. Yeah. We asked our elderly neighbors if we could get the groceries for them, and yeah, they were just blown away that we would reach out to them and ask, and yes, they were happy to accept, because obviously right now it's very difficult for them to get out of the house. So beautiful moments like this, and it all has to do with communication. Usually I probably wouldn't have dared to go over there because I could offer that at any time, but right now this gave me permission to go say no. I
awesome. Well done.
This has been so great and insightful. Thank you so much, Amy. Please share with our listeners and viewers where people can find out more about you and also what else you have coming up in the next.
Sure. Yes. Thank you, Sarah. I really enjoyed it too. Okay, let's think. Instagram, Facebook, people can reach me at Amy Carroll Coaching. Twitter, my handle is at Amy Carroll 63. LinkedIn, it's at Amy Carroll. Now, some people don't know, that's Carroll with 2 R's and 2 L's.
Yeah.
Also, like you, I have a podcast. People can find it on Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, and they can find it through Carroll Communication Coaching. Now, it's like every social media I have, it seems like I have a different handle. So people can just go to my website, Carroll Communication, or rather just carrollcoaching.com and find it.
That's probably the easiest. It's like your
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and then they can also find those resources, the feelings and needs list, the newsletter on getting rid of butt.
And your book.
Go ahead.
And your book, The Ego Tango.
Oh yeah, The Ego Tango. It can be found on Amazon, and there's an ebook version as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and then I do have a couple of things. Assuming life does go back to some sense of normal, I'm going to be running my leadership presence course, which is an open program, 2-day small group intensive in the fall in the French region here in Switzerland. And in 2021, in June, I'm going to be doing a week-long, the complete retreat on using all sorts of communication and improv to help people become more powerful communicators.
So fun. And people can't see you if they're listening to the podcast, Amy, but how tall are you? Like 155 or something like that? And you are this powerhouse.
I think I'm 150 on a really good hair day.
Okay. What's that in feet? Just for people.
In feet, it's 4'10" and a half.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's great. I look forward to checking that retreat out because that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I have one last question. Amy, what are you grateful for today or this week?
I'm grateful for bravery, my own bravery of, just like you reaching out to people who I don't know, offering them help, even when it may not land well. And the bravery for other people around the world that we're, whether it's letting go of perfectionism or being on the front line to support people. It's just so awesome.
Yeah, this has been great. Thanks so much, Amy.
Thank you, Sarah.